Welcome to the Transform Sales Podcast, where forward-thinking business leaders come to share their experiences and ideas, learn from each other, and amplify their results together.
Hey guys, what's up? Amir Reiter here for another episode of Transform Sales Podcast. I have my guest, Catarina Hoch, I think I pronounce it, VP of Global Marketing.
Hoch?
I botched
Sorry,
last
I'm
name.
not going to make you talk in German. Don't worry, Amir.
I'm actually, my grandparents are German. It's the Reiter last
Okay.
name, but I think I botched last names on purpose. But I appreciate you being on the show. I love your content. I'm actually a big consumer of it, and I always share it. So, and you know it's true because you've seen me share it. But thank you again for joining. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for the invite. Yeah, all good here. It's Friday afternoon in the UK, almost pub time. So all good.
So you're based in the UK, but German background.
I'm in the UK. Yeah,
Awesome.
exactly.
Awesome. So Operatix has been one of the faster growing sales agencies out there. I'm sure you had a lot to do with that, with all your amazing demand gen. But we love to have open conversations and talk about, agencies' best buyers and also mistakes that buyers make. Before getting into that, we'd love to know your journey. How did you get into the outsourced sales world to begin with? What brought you to this world?
Right. So I think I landed in this world a little bit by accident, but I think I was one of the great examples of the culture of Operatix, which is a promote from within culture. So I actually started as an SDR for the German market. For those that don't know, I'm half German and half Brazilian, so you can definitely hear a bit of a German accent there. So when I moved from Brazil to the UK, I was looking into going into a new career. And I started in the SDR world, although my background has always been in marketing. And at the time, my English wasn't great, so I needed to work in German or Portuguese. And that's how I ended up in the SDR world, and that's how I ended up in Operatix. So I did the SDR job for 6 months. It built great foundations to get into the B2B tech world. Yeah. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to go back into marketing, which is where my passion is. Yeah. And so I started as a marketing manager at Operatix, and now I'm the VP of marketing after 7 years. And I'm also part of the board. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. It's been quite an exciting journey, and it's great to be part of that growth from. I think when I joined, we were like 30 people, and now we are 300. So it's pretty.
Yeah, well, you're glowing just talking about it, and I could feel your sense of pride, and I honestly don't know any VPs of marketing that actually have done the SDR work first, right? So it's all making sense now why your content's so awesome, because you're actually creating it from the perspective of being an expert at what is a hard position, right? And not that easy for many. Do you think that your time as an SDR has helped you with demand gen and content in general, where you just have like this first person perspective of what is needed?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the SDR role overall builds great foundations when it comes to sales and marketing, because you really have to understand your buyer. You need to understand your ICP. You have to be very good in the messaging and kind of boiling down really the value of the company that you're pitching. And obviously, me having done the job, I had to go through all of these phases, and also having had that relationship with my account managers at the time and my customers, I also could put myself in their shoes and understand why they were hiring Operatix, what were their needs, and how we could be helpful for them. So I think it was super important for me to have done the job.
I didn't know you were an SDR first, so it's all making sense, because I did like your content, and I found it to be the least fluffy content out there. It seemed like the person creating it actually understood the role. So it all makes sense now, and it's an awesome journey to go from an SDR to a marketing leader, which is your passion, right? But it's all generating revenue. So I feel like, when people listen to this, it's like marketing and sales, I think, are all revenue, right? So I think it's more moving up to a place where you can really show your skills. Cool that you also learn English, at the same time. So now you have 3 languages you speak fluently, which is great. Talk to me a little bit about Operatix. You guys have been highly successful. You've grown tremendously. I think we've had your CEO on a recent call with John Barrows and the SDR efficiency role, talking about all his growth. Like, who who do you guys serve the best, and where do you serve them? Do you guys focus mainly on software or services? Do you EMEA, Europe market, US market? What's your top buyer profile that you guys help?
Yeah. So we work exclusively in the B2B tech market, right? So our client are mostly SaaS vendors. And that's kind of one of our USPs, that we really only focus on tech. So we understand very well the buying centers or the decision makers involved. Some of the industries that we work in are cybersecurity, big data, IoT, infrastructure, cloud. So typically companies that have long and complex sales cycles and that really need that kind of multi-threading and very focused target accounts that they need to get into. So that's where we really thrive.
So you guys focus on technology, right?
Yeah, 100% technology. Yeah, only B2B tech. And then in terms of geographies, so we operate globally. So we have an office in Hampshire in the UK, near London. So that's where our headquarters are. So we have a strong presence in EMEA. We have over 20 language capabilities in terms of the coverage in Europe. We opened an office in the US in 2016 in Dallas. So through that office, we serve the North American market and LATAM. So we also have Spanish speakers there and Portuguese speakers. And then we recently opened Singapore. So that's actually quite a new, it's recent now. Yeah. Ray's actually our CEO. He's going to Singapore in 2 weeks' time. And we hired our first man on the ground there. We already have some reps working on APAC campaigns remotely. So yeah, we are conquering the world, which is exciting.
So you guys are conquering the world, which is awesome. And I want to poke at your questions a little bit more because I kind of expected you to go to mention all this amazing world growth, right? SaaS, we're on page there, right? You mentioned something about a complex sales cycle. Does that have to do with an ACV rate where you guys are better servicing a client with like a 35 to 55K ACV rate? And if so, what is that ACV sweet spot for you guys?
Yeah, I think we are very much business case driven. So like we want to serve clients that see ROI from what we do.
Okay.
And because we are not an expensive solution, not a cheap solution, right? Like we have very qualified people doing what we do. And often it justifies working with a company like us when the ACV is above 50K, I would say.
Yeah.
Some companies where they have long contracts or like over multi-year contracts, often the ACV is a little bit lower, but it justifies investing in a company like us for the length of the contract, so for the lifetime value.
Yeah.
And often companies they have low average deal values, but they have a massive focus on client acquisition and they see it on the long term. So we do make it very clear to the customers that we really work on based on ROI, and we always build a business case whenever we talk to the customers. If we do have customers coming to us saying our average deal value is low, but we understand that we need to make that investment at front, and then it will pay off throughout long contracts, then that absolutely makes sense for us as well. But typically they will have average deal values 50 to 100K.
It's an interesting way how you answer that question, right? Because I think for me, I understand that sweet spot allows most partners to really establish a clear ROI track record, right? But I also think that sometimes that we tend to go that direction just because buyers are not really ready to calculate the time it takes, because ROI means nothing without time frame, right? So 100%. It's like, it doesn't mean, you know what I mean? So it's like ROI over 12 months, ROI over a year, right? LTV. And a lot of times you guys don't know this. So I make sure it makes sense why that's your sweet spot. And it's very common. But you said something that stood out to me where you're like, we're not cheap, right? But I'll ask you a question. If during normal market conditions, a software company can have a 10x valuation on 1 million in revenue, so now it's $10 million, why would that require a cheap provider?
I think value is completely subjective, right? So like you may think something is cheap and I may think something is expensive. It depends on how much value we put on it.
Yeah.
Some companies will say we are super cheap because we generate an extreme ROI to them. And some companies will say we're expensive because they didn't see the value in it. So I think it's hard to talk about cheap and expensive. I think it's more about the value that we deliver. And the value
I'm the one saying that you guys are cheap and saying that you deliver value. So I think it's interesting because I'm hearing you say that, right? I think first of all, the word cheap or expensive, like I would probably want to invest more in generating revenue, right? Like I probably would never want to go the cheap route, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that I think what you're getting into really is, and it's going to be the next question about like buyer behavior, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's more about buyer behavior and perception, and they might think something's expensive, but they might not even know their own business model. They might not even know that 1 million revenue is 10x, right? Because now if you're like, hey, you're going to invest $1 million, but you're going to get 1.5 million in cash over 3 years and call it, $15 million valuation. One would say that price might seem expensive, but you're getting 3 times your money and it's a great deal.
Yeah.
Before I get into that, what separates you guys from other agencies besides your focus USP on software? What would you say separates you guys?
Yeah, I think the fact that we are specialists in tech, that definitely is a USP, because obviously it's such a complex infrastructure and different buying centers. So obviously that is certainly part of our USPs. The fact that we are global as well. So often, especially with larger vendors where they want like one central point of contact that they like, we deal with the whole global campaign. I think that's another really important point. And kind of knowing the intricacies of all of the local cultures, especially in Europe where there is so many different languages and cultures. And then obviously our teams are all based in those countries, right? So like the US team is based in Dallas, the EMEA team is based in London, or, so living in the countries does make a difference in terms of the cultural understanding. So, and then I think the third piece in terms of what makes us different, us being a service business, it's our people that make us different. And I know that sounds a little bit like, oh, everybody says that, but we have a very strong promote from within culture. So like we really build a really strong culture at Operatix, and we have a very well structured onboarding, training, and an academy to kind of further the development of all of our team members and our reps. So it's definitely that investment in the culture and the people that do make us different, because even when you look at our reviews from our customers on platforms like G2 or Clutch, sometimes they even shout out the name of the rep that they're working with, because really, the fact that we are an outsourced vendor, there is sometimes a little bit of misunderstanding, or companies just see us as like a provider or a third party, but really we are part of their team, right? We are representing their brand. We call and we email and we reach out to people on behalf of them. Like we are part of their company. And so that integration and that quality of the team members that are working on behalf of our customers, this is so key for us. And it definitely is something that makes us different. And that is super important for the
So, I love your answer because you mentioned a lot of things, right? And you're smiling the whole time, which shows that you mean it and you're proud about it, because I could sense the feeling that you feel like you've been part of that growth, right? I think you've been part of what separates you apart. Surprised you didn't say it was your amazing marketing team that separates you guys apart. But, just to recap, what sets you guys apart from other B2B lead gen outsource agencies is domain expertise in software, right? Mm-hmm. A global footprint with global teams that understand the local language, and the way that you connect your global team and promote from within allows you guys to be a preferred partner for software companies looking to launch campaigns, right?
Yeah, 100%. And the academy, I guess that, it's obviously the ongoing training and how we go through the whole recruitment, qualification, and training of the team.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Talk to me about mistakes that buyers make when they're selecting a vendor. And I always do the recap of, these aren't mistakes that affect your ability to convert them as a client, but mistakes that would ultimately hurt someone's accuracy during their buying selection, right? Like they're just asking the wrong questions, looking under the wrong rocks, and you're like, you're hurting yourself from finding the right partner. What have you seen?
I love that question, Amir, because I think I would say like the number one mistake is that companies underestimate the complexity of sales development teams. So we do often hear companies that say, oh, why am I going to outsource if I can just go and build my own team, right? And there is absolutely nothing wrong in building an internal team. And often this is 100% the right thing to do. But you do need a lot of time, resources, investment, management, and there is so much that can go wrong with building your internal team that I think when companies come to us and they are kind of questioning themselves, should I build a team or should I not? We always encourage them, go and build your team. And in 6 months' time, we're going to talk again because they do come back, And I think you mentioned the SDR handbook that we recently released. It is an ebook and is literally like a step-by-step process of how to build and manage an SDR team. And often companies would say, oh, why are you giving away your secret sauce? Like, why are you telling people how to do your job? You're like, because it's a bit like, you can go and cook a recipe from recipe. You get the recipe, you get the food, and you go and cook it, or you go to a restaurant and eat it, right? It's completely different experiences. So I think I can use that analogy to explain a little bit the differences of building an internal team or using an external party. Because sometimes using an external party will get to results quicker because you get people that will be trained and ramped up and they've done it day in, day out. They're specialists in it. And if you are building a team from scratch, you often have to factor in the mistakes.
Reality. Let's call it reality.
Exactly.
By the way, so that was an awesome answer. Then you chimed into being sales mode, which is awesome, which is just back to the proud of your it went into why you guys are awesome, which is awesome. I didn't ask what mistakes they make and then why do you guys are great. No, but you jumped in there and said that. We're going to attach, by the way, in the comments of this podcast, a link to your resource for anybody who thinks they could do it internally. We hope you can. Really, if you digest what you just said at what's the number one buying mistake that buyers make, it really comes down to they're making the mistake of underestimating the difficulty of the actual business development process, right? And that's where I connect $1 million in revenue to 10 million valuation back to why should it be cheap, right? And why should it be easy, right? Because if it was easy for everybody to build a business development, a team, a company, and a business development team and become worth millions, everybody would do it. The reality is that that's not easy, right? So the biggest mistake that buyers make is that they don't understand the complexity. And that makes a lot of sense because if you don't understand the complexity of what you're buying, you're automatically going to have unrealistic expectations, unrealistic time expectations, right? And it's like setting you up for failure because if you think a very difficult thing is very easy, how could you ever really be happy with the results, right? So it's like their mental mindset will never line up with the reality of what they're getting, right? Versus a buyer that comes in like, I know it's difficult. I know this is going to take time. I know that we're going to have to warm up email addresses, approve quotes. I know that we're going to have to give you feedback on what's being said in the meeting. I know we're going to have to follow up in the meetings. I know that we're going to have to constantly review everything and give you real time. If they came to buy like that, you would be able to sell to them better and help them better, right? So anybody listening, it's just
and I think like any function, is difficult. Whenever it involves managing people, there is always going to be things that are completely unexpected. Someone is off sick or goes on maternity leave or whatever. And I think this is obviously we're all humans and these things happen. But the advantage of using an outsourced partner is that we have to deal with that problem, not you, right? Like we'll have to be ready to replace that resource or make sure that the flow of the leads and the pipeline is still there because you hire us to generate pipeline. You don't hire us to put seats, people calling, we're there to generate pipeline. So I think it's kind of the outcome rather than everything that goes around it.
Well, typically when people outsource, it's when they've hired an in-house team, like you said before, go ahead and do it. It'll be back in 6 months. They always are, or have tried. So it's kind of this weird thing where I feel like they know it's difficult and I know they know it's hard, but they think that acting like it's easy and everyone should do it is benefiting them in the buying process when it's really not. So it's almost as if like they might know these things and they might admit it, but when they come down to the selection process, they forget everything they know and they have these adversarial behaviors, right? And perhaps it's just a factor of how B2B sales has been lacking transparency and people have been signing contracts with things that people don't need. So everyone's just always in this you versus me mode, right? Versus we're in this together, right?
Yeah.
What would you say to that, to anybody who's listening who might feel that way? What would be your best advice for them?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we do a lot, and that sounds again quite counterintuitive, is we create a bit of friction during the sales process. And the reason why we do that is because, especially like with startups or less established companies, they come to us sometimes like with a massive pipeline problem, and they think that their issue is because they aren't generating enough opportunities or like conversations. And sometimes you have to go back and look at, right, do you actually know what message is resonating? What is actually your ICP? Is your product mature enough to go to market? So there is a lot of questions we need to ask before we take on a client, because if we don't believe on the value proposition and if we don't help them to build those foundations and have those kind of fundamentals in place, then we can't be successful, right? So one of the hardest things that we find is on our kickoff calls is when we ask the question to our client, what are the 3 things that make you different? Or why would somebody spend 30 minutes of their time speaking to you and not to your competitor? You wouldn't believe how difficult it is for
No, I would. 90%
you answer that.
Yeah.
So, you know, and the whole objective of kind of the SDR work is us talking about benefits and not features, right? What's the value? Not like how cool is your software. It's like, what is the value? What is the business value for the person that you're talking about? So there is a lot of work that we have to do in extracting that out of the clients, because especially, as I said, the more kind of startups and less established vendors, because they are often still figuring it out, and we have to be there helping them to do that.
Expectations are here. The understanding of their buyers are here. The understanding of their offers here and their values here. So if really expectations are here and your understanding is here and you're adversarial with the sales agency that's hiring and just demanding results, you're really missing reality of what they know. And and it's like they're coming to hire you guys because they know they have a problem, but they won't admit it because they think that admitting it is a weakness. What that causes is lost money, right? Because if they are able to look in the mirror and say, "Hey, Catarina, we're having a problem. We don't know the answers to that. We know that it's going to take some time to get results because we know we need to figure out our messaging and our unique selling proposition." They would get a higher ROI, right? So you know, you've been muscling like me. We like muscle our way through with that 50,000 ACV where we don't educate them enough because we know we can't, but we can show them an ROI. But if they really understood the difficulties and really were honest with themselves and us as leaders in B2B lead gen, they make more money, right? And that's what this is all about, right? So listen, this has been awesome. I plan on having you on more often to pick your brain more. I'm even more pumped that I know that you were an SDR, because now I feel like we've been in the trenches together, because I too as a CEO have also been an SDR my whole life as well. So, and now it just makes sense, right? Like
we know how hard the job is, right, Amir? Like I have so much respect for SDRs, because it can be so disheartening as well to get so much rejection, and like you just have to power through it. And I think often SDRs are underappreciated. So I do have a lot of respect for SDRs. Having done the job myself and seeing how hard our team works, it's like kudos to them.
100%. And any other sales agency that a lot of sales agencies struggle to produce high quality content like you and high content marketing, and they're probably not promoting from within with their SDRs, right? They're probably not identifying the top talent that can take all those skills and create amazing content. So that's also an opportunity for agencies to grow too. This has been awesome. If somebody wants to reach out to you to pick your brain, to learn more about your journey from an SDR to a marketing leader to hire you guys, where can they find you? What's the best way for them to connect with you?
So the easiest way is probably on LinkedIn. So you can find me there, Catarina Hoch, and then my email address is there as well. And check out operatix.net. There is, as you mentioned, a ton of valuable content for revenue leaders. We also have our podcast, B2B Revenue Acceleration. Check it out.
You're gonna invite me? I never get invited. It's so sad.
There we go, Amir.
I'll have to
you will definitely be our guest soon.
I'm an SDR. I'm not afraid to ask. That's not one of my issues. Thank you again for joining, everybody. I appreciate you tuning in to the Transform Sales podcast. We are going to be interviewing more amazing leaders like Catarina, and we're going to be picking their brains so that people can learn, they can grow together. And thank you. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.